Okay, so updates. These are our 2023 updates on this concept I've been studying for the past couple of years. Psychological advantageousness. I did a video on this before, but today we're going to do a new video. Basically, making some changes to it. And I'll explain it as I go through it. So feel free to get some snacks because we're going to do this in real time. One second. Okay, so let's start with this. All right, so basically we're going to start from scratch, from the top, and then put everything back on. Okay. So I'm going to just go over some of these parts again. So if you look up the etymology of the word psychology, it refers to, I'm not sure this is cool. It refers to the study of the soul. Is it clear? All right, so look at the term, the etymology of the word psychology. It refers to the study of the soul. So when we say psychological, we're talking about something related to the soul. Even though, nowadays it may seem like psychologists, people in mental health, like social workers, therapists, depending on their orientation, it may seem like, they're not talking about souls at all, and where does the soul come into the picture? And so, in my research, we're using the etymological understanding of the word because my assumption is that souls exist. So just off, like in terms of the conceptual framework of the theory of what this concept is, at the baseline, just starting off, we're already supposing that souls exist. It's not even arguable. Now, proof that a soul exists is like outside of the scope of what I'm doing here. That's another conversation for another day. Today we just want to talk about psychology and specifically psychological advantageousness. So when you see this word psychological, here, study. Uh, so, and so one may ask the question, what is the soul? If this field studies the soul, what is the soul? And I'm going to give you the basic answers that fit within my theory, and then feel free to comment or say your thoughts, or whatever it is after. So as you can see, well, you probably can't see it, but on here I wrote, the soul is the algorithm, it's the chooser, it's the agent. So like right now, you see a body, right? There is some entity inside of this flesh that you're seeing that's making these arms move, producing speech, things like that. And because there's an infinite number of bodily movements I could do at any given point in time, there's an infinite number of things I could say or ways I could say what I say. There is some selection or choice in what I actually do. And so one way to look at the soul is that is the chooser. That's the entity that decides, okay, let's give this science presentation using art, or let's hold a paintbrush in the right hand instead of in the left hand, And so this is important because within this framework, we're going to get to the point where we say, okay, you can understand the soul based on their choices. I can understand the algorithm based on the output or the mechanisms by which it works, and then the products that it creates through those mechanisms. And so the second part, so that's psychological, just things relating to the soul, things relating to what the soul chooses as they manifest in physical reality and basically embody a vessel. The other side is advantageousness. Right now, I don't know the etymology of this word, but it's okay because I'm not. I only need to at this point. But we can break this word up into smaller words just to make it more understandable. So let's just break it up into advantage. All right. We all know what an advantage is, and just regular, English, the way we use it. We might say, oh, my family is all track runners. So when I'm in school and I try for the track team, I feel like I have an advantage. Why? Because maybe my parents ran track, so genetically I may have an advantage. Or maybe because growing up in a household, we talked about track, we stretched, we exercised, we went on family runs, like it was just part of our culture and our lifestyle. Their choices, you know what I'm saying? My parents' choices affected me. That may have given me some type of advantage when I got to compete against my peers who maybe they want to run track, but their parents never ran track, or their parents not involved in their track pursuits, or whatever the case is. Advantage also, it's kind of like having an upper hand or some benefit, and the benefit is kind of distinct from whatever the competition has available to them. So if we all get it equally, like if we all have track parents, one might argue that that's no longer an advantage per se because we all get it. But within my framework, I would say that it's still an advantage. It just may seem like it's not because of the sample that you have. So if you got 10 track runners, they all come from track families. Yeah, coming from a track family don't seem like much of an advantage. But advantage is relative, because any of those 10 could go out into the rest of the world and compete against other athletes in other states, countries, wherever, and go against people that haven't had those backgrounds. Their advantage is still there. It just may not be as easy to see if they're around people that's on the same type of time. And I think, throughout the research, I do want to connect the scientific jargon with just regular speech, how the layperson talks. And you hear that quote of people say, like, if you can make it in North, you can make it anywhere. Like, being able to survive in the ghetto can empower you to survive in the ghetto in a whole nother place. Like, you can survive North, you probably can survive DC or Chicago or New Orleans or LA or Detroit or Atlanta. You know, basically there's some advantage, given to living in these environments, but that advantage may not be visible among, a bunch of people living in North. We all live in North, so we may overlook, like, yeah, we do have an advantage. It is certain circumstances that we feel like we're more equipped to deal with because we grew up in this environment. And so when we leave, we might go to a whole nother town. We out West Bubble, and we like, oh, this is easy. It just feels relaxed, but it only feels so relaxed because back home felt so tense. And so I know for me, like, my comfortability in other places is definitely related to like the tenseness back home. Like, this is not to like misrepresent Newark. I think Newark is a great place, but growing up in Newark, wasn't always an easy trip. But in a sense, going through that experience, I feel like confers some advantage because when you leave, there's a certain strength and a pride that people from North have. It's like we feel confident, and this is not like all across the board, but I'm just saying there is some advantage, especially if you go to another hood and you got to deal with similar things. Like, you already have some resilience and some resistance to like letting those things knock you off your square or overwhelm you. So, not to belabor the point, but an advantage is basically like a benefit to somebody. We add the us part, OUS, it becomes advantageous. So advantage is a noun, might also be a verb. Advantageous is an adjective. So now it's kind of like we was here, and then we're going to here with it, right? So here is like advantage. You got some benefit. You grew up in Newark, so now you moved to DC. So you comfortable being in certain hood environments, or like the way the neighborhood look don't really affect you because you already used to neighborhoods that look like that. Cool. You could adapt. You feel me? You could assimilate or adapt to that environment easily compared to somebody from like Wisconsin that's like, oh man, I've never been around this before. Or they got like a culture shock. Advantageous, when you step to the side, is basically describing the thing that provides the advantage. So I can say, being from North, I have an advantage. But then when I turn, it's like I said, growing up in North is advantageous. And then you add ness at the end. So one thing about science, it's a lot of big words, but they all break down into smaller parts. And I'm not creating this body of work to make it confusing. If anything, I feel like, my goal is to make it something that even somebody that's not, so much into school, or, maybe they dropped out, they should still even be able to understand what I'm saying. So advantage is here, advantageous is here, and then advantageousness is here. It's kind of like we rotating around this object, right? Advantage, I have an advantage because I grew up in North. Advantageous is growing up in North is advantageous. Advantageousness now basically seeks to quantify how much of an advantage did I get from growing up in North, or how advantageous was it to grow up in North. So now we want to put this on like a scale, basically. Like, And I put it on a spectrum of low to high. And this not only applies to the notion of advantageousness, which can be applied to, you can say like financial advantageousness or educational advantageousness, but specifically when we talk about psychological advantageousness, there's going to be this scale, basically. And it's going to range, and that's for two reasons. For one, is saying that when we talk about advantageousness, the assumption is that everybody has some type of advantage. Every soul has some advantage based off the choices that they pick. That's why they pick those choices. If the choices didn't give them some advantage, they probably would have picked something different. And even if, like, at face value, it seemed like that's not the case, sometimes people have, twisted reasons for why, they choose certain things. So, advantageousness is essentially asking, in short, it's asking how much of an advantage did whatever it was give to the person. And so when we talk about psychological advantageousness, we're saying how much of an advantage does the soul get based on the soul's choices. Psychological advantageousness basically refers to the differential value of those choices and how it affects the soul's quality of life. So think about, a soul is in this flesh, right? And it's, I am a soul in this flesh, and I'm going through life. And since a baby, since I come out of the womb, and some might argue even in the womb, or even before that, as an egg and a sperm cell in my parents, if depending on how far you want to go, there's this process, right, of choices, right? So, and not just choices in terms of like conscious choices. There may be choices in terms of how the brain wires together, right? So, like, what associations do I develop as I grow older? And so, when you think about like the short of psychological advantageousness, just remember, like, the soul got to make choices, but how does the soul know which one to pick? So, in that regard, this concept allows the soul a way to evaluate those choices and figure out which are better and which are less favorable, which give more of an advantage and which don't. And a prime example is like a belief. So a belief is a choice. Now, some people, when they first born, everybody's kind of born into a culture, right? So you look at Rothenberger's social ecological model. There's systems that wrap around an individual soul. So you kind of, it's like walking into the movie already going on, you just got to find your seat and like go from there. And so as you do that, you may make certain choices or adopt certain beliefs that's going to affect, your experience. So, for example, growing up in a Christian household, you may be told from, like, before you even remember language, that God exists. And the belief that God exists is a choice. And so this construct allows us to evaluate objectively at most, intersubjectively at least, the value of believing that God exists. Up until now, and this is what this construct adds to psychology and to the world, up until now, people don't feel comfortable judging beliefs. And so now we have a basis to do that. And the basis is, how's it working for you? Which is something that, therapists use in sessions. So it's not far-fetched. It's not something that hasn't been done. It's not something that hasn't been practiced. If you talk to your therapist and say they're more of a listener than a directive therapist, and you say, oh yeah, I smoke 3 cigarettes a day, they may not say, hey, you should stop smoking 3 cigarettes a day. They may say, how's it working for you? Like, how is that benefiting you? And that's essentially the question that this is asking. It's like, I'm not saying the choice that you made is good or bad based off my personal values or my personal morals. I'm saying it's good or bad based off how it's working for you. And a great clip that y'all might want to look up. There was a clip. It was an interview of Lil Wayne. He had a cup. I don't know what was in it, but I don't know if the interviewer asked him or something. But basically, what I got from what he said was that it don't really matter what was in his cup because he sold like 100 million records with that cup. So whatever was in the cup, you feel me? You probably want to get some in your cup. Like that's the advantageousness. Even if you're saying, man, it might have been lean in that cup. It might have been alcohol in that cup. Could have been water in that cup. Could have been Gatorade. Could have been whatever in that cup. It sounds like his counter argument is basically like, whatever is in this cup is effective. Whatever is in this cup is pragmatic. Whatever is in this cup is giving me results. It's improving my quality of life. And therefore, it's arguable that whatever's in this cup is good. It's good to the extent that it gives me a better quality of life. And when you think about the fact that every soul at some point comes to a physical death, I mean, it seems worthwhile to make the time here manifest in the physical reality as enjoyable as possible. Now, you may get some pretzels, and I say pretzels because like things get a little twisted, where one might argue that, what if it's to my advantage to live a miserable life? And in those situations, that may be an exceptional case. But I think we would have to like untangle the notion of misery, because if you enjoy misery, then is it actually misery, or does it just appear that way? But I mean, there's a lot of ways to break that down. But just to get us back on track, psychological advantageousness refers to the differential value of the choices that the soul makes based on their quality of life outcomes. And when it comes to choices, like taking a closer look at choices, we break down psychological into these subdomains, or really it's one domain, but it's divisible. So we got mental, and the mental part of psychological includes learning, memory, thoughts, beliefs, executive functioning, logic, reason, things like that. And we have the emotional. And the emotional includes affect, moods, attitudes. Beliefs actually represent an overlap between mental and emotional, because in order to have it, like, beliefs aren't necessarily like plain, cut and dry, so you might have the belief that God exists, but it might be a core belief as opposed to a periphery belief, meaning there's an emotional charge that you feel that insulates that belief, like you feel like that's tried and true, like you hold it close to your heart. You can kind of see core beliefs, because if somebody challenges a core belief, usually people become activated in defense of the belief. Now, some people may be like just a laid back person, so it won't matter to them, but you try going to a Christian telling them Jesus is not a real person, or something that goes against their faith, you're attacking their core beliefs, and so you may get, a more animated or excitatory response. Even like physiologically, the way their body is arranged physiologically, you may see more activation just off words, like just off you saying words that go against their core belief, their efforts to defend it. It might increase cortisol, it might increase cytokines, it might increase a lot of different changes. Now, I don't have data to prove that these things happen. All I have is interactions. And that's the beauty of, me being from Newark, New Jersey, and doing research and growing up in the hood and seeking higher education is because I could see the blend because I am the blend. Like that's been my life experience. Um, just a side tangent, but me living in the hood, like going to an address that's in the hood every day and spending summers and after school, like all my life is in the hood, but from 8 to 3 p.m., I'm in an academic setting, I'm living the blend, so it's the experience itself is kind of like a braid, you just boom, 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 boom. And you got this one braid, but it's consistent of these different parts. And so I say all that to say that I see a very clear thread between what the scientists are saying and then what we say in the neighborhood. So say all that to say, not to get off track here, but psychological breaks down into the mental and the emotional. And I put these two together and I call it the mental and emotional intrapsychic. Probably use a smaller brush. Gotta know how to use some edges. Intrapsychic infrastructure. Intrapsychic just basically means like within the individual. So, what's going on in their mind, their mentality, their mindset, things like that. And infrastructure refers to the setup. Now, what I'm describing in words has a neuropsychological correlates to it. I won't explain all of that here because I'm still uncovering those things. This presentation is by no means like a final conclusory like presentation. This is just an update on what I've been finding out as I've been looking at this over time. So infrastructure is kind of like the skeleton. If you ever see the like a new building being built and you see like the frame, like that part, it's like the thing that how things are organized and arranged, like connecting one part to another, which sounds neurophysiological because we know the brain works with connections. You got this part here with this, this long axon, this long dendrite, and they reach out and they stretch and they meet another one, and it's like gaps in between, but they talk to each other. There's these different connections, and the layperson sometimes we think something wrong with us because we could jump from top to top to top to top of what I could talk to you about tacos and talk to you about taking a poop and talk to you about I don't know soccer and then talk to you about elephants or whatever the case is, and sometimes you might smell a certain smell and remember, and that might trigger a memory. All of that is like the first person phenomenological experience of your own neurophysiological wiring. You have these associations paired, that you created based off the choices you made, based off your mental and emotional intrapsychic infrastructure. Certain things are related to each other, and that's why people have like specific triggers. But the triggers, going back to like the soul having these options, the triggers aren't arbitrary. Triggers are experiential, and so there's a experience that's had first where the trigger is established. You develop these buttons, and I get into like keybinds and stuff like that. My point being, we look at psychological advantageousness. We want to take a closer look at just the psychological part. It breaks down into the mental and emotional intrapsychic infrastructure. That infrastructure is basically how that soul set themselves up mentally. Now, in this scenario, it's worthwhile to separate a soul from a mind. And the reason I make the distinction is because I would make the case, I would make the argument that to a certain extent, if we're saying like souls choose beliefs, I would argue that there are people believe what they can most of the time, not necessarily what they want. Even though people believe what they want, but sometimes people want to believe things but they can't because certain experiences that they had prevent them from doing that, or they haven't had enough experience to realize that belief. And when I say realize, I mean to make real, to have a certain disposition or attitude towards the belief where you feel as though this is real, it becomes a core belief. Like the point of realization is the movement of information to knowledge to a belief, maybe a periphery belief to a core belief. And then it's like, I realized this, I had this epiphany because that's when it settled in, like I'm holding that close to the heart. And even that may have a neuro psychological, neurophysiological underpinning a pathway, understanding like, you know, the way the human body is organized is kind of like an electrical system. And so we have nerves running all throughout the body. And there's one nerve, the vagus nerve, that kind of runs down the trunk. Again, I would encourage anybody listening to this, you know, fact check me, you know, do more research. I mean, this is open science in action mixed with art, you feel me? So anybody got any critiques, anything, you know, I'm more than happy to hear what you got to say. Maybe you might teach me something that could help further the notion of the construct. So yeah, basically, within the mental and emotional intrapsychic infrastructure, I included drives, I included urges. I forgot my point earlier. Again, this is live. I'm not rewinding to find out, but we're just gonna keep going. But yeah, sometimes we jump from topic to topic, but maybe that's just how your brain organized. You know? And so another assumption that is in the conceptual framework is that beliefs are arbitrary. Now, that may sound contradictory because I just said, you know, people believe what they can, not necessarily what they want to. And when I say people believe what they can, I mean people believe what they have a capacity for to understand. And it's kind of like trying to explain a complex idea to somebody that doesn't have the prerequisites to understand the idea. So how could they believe it, you know? And so I think in that sense, it makes the mental and emotional aspect of an individual comparable to the physical. Now, if we were talking physical, like I know if I can't lift 5 pounds, there's no way I'm going to be able to lift 100. That makes sense physically because we can see it, it's concrete. But the same thing happens with certain beliefs, certain nuances that maybe people that have read a lot of books, maybe argue in classrooms a lot, spend a lot of time engaging with intellectual material. You ever like have a conversation about a construct or something with somebody, and you get tired? Like being able to hold the construct in your mind, in your, you know, internal world takes energy. A lot of energy. You know, you might want to eat a snack after this. You might want some candy or some cookies or something sweet, get some sugar in you because your body needs some glucose or something. It needs to replenish the loss. But there's such thing as like mental fatigue, and the brain does use energy to like do what it does. It's also electrical. So kind of lost my train of thought there. But say that to say, yeah, come back to it when I get it. But I'll also add in the mental and emotional intrapsychic infrastructure schemas. And a perfect example of a schema, you know, that anybody can understand is like anything times 0 is 0. Schemas are like the quick rules we use. Like you don't want to sit there and have to process information case by case every time. We start like over time, we start to develop general rules. I remember what I was saying about um, belief being arbitrary, but at the same time, people believe in what they have the capacity to believe. So these actually tie together because the quality or the caliber of your schema is going to be related to your capacity, your mental capacity. Now, when you think about prime example, in schools, you might learn reading, writing, math, science, history, etc. Um, from my understanding, the teachers basically throw a oop to the mental health team because social emotional learning builds on basic academic fundamentals. And if you don't have basic academic fundamentals, it's going to make the social and emotional work harder. For a prime example, in speaking to somebody about things that they've been through, you might want to use an analogy to illustrate something, maybe a metaphor, something like that, to make a comparison between one thing and another. And if somebody's never learned about analogies or don't understand analogies, or if you gave them a test and you gave them 10 analogies and they could, it's like multiple choice, like a apple is to tree what I don't know, orange is to, or what strawberry is to, and then they give you the different options. If you don't do well on identifying analogies, then your capacity to understand various analogies, like in clinical work, is also going to be affected. For somebody who might, for example, struggling with math. Now, the thing about math, my understanding again, is math is primarily on the mental side, and is really testing your ability to reason. When we think about school, academia, especially up until, let's just say, K through 8, you take the same classes over and over again, right? And so it's comparable to like getting a new laptop and say you want to type a paper, but you don't have Microsoft Suite, so you don't have Word, all you got is Notepad. So like you could type it, but you can't type it and do all the functions that you can do on this other app because you ain't downloaded it yet. In the process of going through school, it's kind of like you get inundated with information in the hopes that you'll download and internalize at least the beneficial aspects of it. So when you become an adult, or like even at your age, you'll be able to type that paper basically. Like you'll have Microsoft Word downloaded into your mental and emotional intrapsychic infrastructure. You'll be able to understand, analogies, or you'll be able to form schemas intelligently. And when I say intelligently, I mean creatively. If we define intelligence as just like the ability to find a new way when the old way don't work, then schemas often have expiration dates. A schema can work within a given time span, a given setting. But in my experience in life, sometimes, you had your cards, you got to play the cards that you dealt, but after a while, that hand is over, you're going to get some new cards. Like, whatever you believe in, at some point, it seems like the cards get reshuffled. Now you got a whole new set of cards. You live in a new place. You probably got like new friends. You probably got a new job. You got new health things going on in your life. You got new stressors and things like that. You're like, man, 5 years ago, my life is totally different. 5 years before that, my life is totally different. It's like periodically you get new situations. But if your schemas stay the same, if you're 30 and you got schemas from when you was 5, 6, or 7, some of those schemas may have become determinant rather than reflective. And initially, when you first formed it, it may have been reflective. So I developed this schema as a reaction to something I was observing. But maybe I'm not in that situation no more, and I never updated. So now I'm creating situations to manifest the schema that I already believe is going to happen. And it's like now at this point, I'm keeping it going. Like I'm the motor, and so it's important to make the connection between like what capacity someone has mentally and emotionally, and compare that to what someone can do physically. Because I think up until now, and this is why this is important, people act like anybody can do anything. Like and this is not saying they can't ever, but sometimes one choice cancels out other possibilities, right? So maybe you could do anything, but you can't do everything at the same time, in the same space on the same day. Like, how do you need to qualify it? But sometimes, for example, my understanding, like, say my scheme is anything times 0 is 0. That's my schema. That's a 5-pound dumbbell. Like, I could pick that up. That's like anybody can understand that. Anytime I see a 0, I already know answer 0. I don't need to see the number. I don't need to see nothing going on with the problem. All I know is I see the 0. I'm gonna put a 0, get it right every time. That only works with simple equations. So you might find, an example is like, I bet my parents told me somebody hit you, hit them back. Anything times 0 is 0, like simple. You hit me, I'm hitting you back, straight like that. Ain't no conversation. I'm not like my mother, my father told me, somebody hit you, hit them back. Cool. That only works in simple situations where it's like 9 times out of 10 in those simple situations, somebody hit you first and they was in the wrong. Somebody hit you first and they was either trying to bully you, punk you, or whatever the case was. So in that sense, you defended yourself. But what about an accident? Like, what if somebody was legitimately mad, but they mad at somebody else and they swung and they missed them, but they hit you? Some people are like, yeah, I'm gonna fight regardless because you hit me. But you're using a schema of 0 times 0. What about like 0.5 times whatever? Is it still 0? No. Like 0.5 times 10 is not 0. So now we add decimals. It's still 0, right? My schema was simple. My schema was anytime I say 0, and I don't want to belabor the point, but as the situations, as the problems that come up become more complex, sometimes we don't update the schemas because our thinking is that, either we totally neglect this, like this becomes subconscious. So some of the schemas, and we're going to get into like the imagery of the house, like some of the schemas may be in the basement. Some of the schemas may be going back to the infrastructure. This is the part that you can't see. And that's why I said, it's like looking at a building before it's built, before they put the drywall up. Because the drywall really hides like all the pipes running through it. The drywall really hides all the pipes and the wiring and everything going on in the house. Like, it's a lot going on in this room, but they put walls up so you can't really see the ins and outs and the insulation and mice or roaches or whatever creatures and ants that live in the walls and all that. Like, you can't see all that. And so schemas kind of function in the same way. Schemas become revealed through the process of therapy. Or if you got somebody that's like acutely aware, or maybe they've been in the gym lifting 100 pounds, so they can recognize, oh yeah, I see why you're struggling. Like, you probably need to start lifting 10 pounds first and work your way up to lifting 100 pounds if you're starting at 5. And so another situation in which a simple schema, like anything times 0 is 0, won't work, is when you get into algebra and you have a complex equation. So you might have 0 times 5,000 in parentheses plus 30 times 2 in parentheses. Like, that's not going to be 0. That 0 is only going to apply to one part of that situation. And so in a similar, like for the layperson, for the everyday person, yeah, your parents told you somebody hit you, hit them back, but that person hit you by accident, and that person was your friend, and the teacher was standing right there next to you. Like, and let's say, to throw it off, and people was like, oh, like people gassing up when you got hit, but at the same time, you got to realize like time and place where you at, and like, was it intentional? So all of those extra ways to like process the situation come from either updating the schema or suspending it enough to have to go through the process of growth or like maturation. And as you mature, your schemas and your beliefs and your thoughts and your moods and your urges, all of these gradually over time become updated. And all of these within your mental and emotional psychic infrastructure, however you set up your mindset is going to affect your advantageousness. Now, we're looking at advantageousness in 2 ways. One, the advantageousness of the soul overall as a whole, like how advantage, how advantageous is your total mental and emotional infrastructure, right? But then also, how advantageous is the individual components of your mental and emotional infrastructure. And it's worthwhile to identify the components because maybe the majority, like 90% of your mentality is fine. Maybe it's just like this one belief that you have, like men shouldn't do work in the house. So if you feel like men shouldn't do work in the house, how's that going to impact your marriage? Or how's that going to impact if you're a bachelor? Like who gonna clean up your crib? Like, so when we talk about advantageousness, our main outcome that we're looking at, that we care about, and what this field of research is all about, is this variable called quality of life. I mean, this is really what it's all about. A lot of psychology focuses on what's wrong with people, like pathology and, oh, you did this wrong, or oh, you got this maladaptive this or that and the third. But really my research is about quality of life. Like what are people doing well? And that's why I said I see psychological advantageousness as a spectrum ranging from low to high. Like everybody's doing well in something, somewhere, somehow, some way. However, you may be doing well like 2 cents versus somebody that's doing well a whole dollar versus somebody who's like a billionaire in terms of like they're doing with like their quality of life. And to give us a closer look at quality of life, I'll use this. I forget the people that created it, but if you want to read my paper, just let me know in the comments. I can email it to you. And I got all my citations and all that. But it's called the 8 Dimensions of Wellness. 8 Dimensions. And basically, the 8 dimensions of wellness include like your physical, social, spiritual, intellectual, financial. There's 3 more areas of a person's life. And so basically, all we're doing is matching the person's mentality, right? Their mental and emotional infrastructure, which is our X variable. This is what we're inputting with their quality of life, which is their output. And we can look at their quality of life as a whole, like one total score, or we can look at like one subdomain, like how is your belief that anything times 0 is 0 affecting you socially? And that may change over time. That's why, it got to get updated. As a kid, this may work because y'all doing basic, how to give you that paper. It's like speed multiplication. Like on that joint, when it's only like all single digit multiplications, if you're on that paper, yeah, anything times 0 is going to work all day. Anything times 1 is that number, it's going to work all day, right? But as you get older and life becomes more complex, and you get thrown more complex problems, it may not work as well. So socially, having such a simple rule or schema or code, and I wrote it here, like schemas are the code, like the coding. If you look at individuals like computers, and it's funny because computers and humans are pretty much mirrors of one another. Like we build computers, like humans build computers, but it's kind of like the way an artist puts themselves in their work. It's like you can't really build a computer without it having some resemblance to humanity, like how we work. And so that's why I was saying like academia is important for social and emotional learning because the teachers are coding you, like the teachers are teaching you the schemas. A math teacher is going to teach you that anything times 0 is 0. The English teacher is going to teach you a period comes at the end of a sentence. And your history teacher is going to teach you different things, science, whatever. They give you like the basic the basics. And then as you get older, you take those same subjects over and over again, and the subject don't change, but the complexity of the problems that I talk about in that subject changes. So, yeah. And then, what am I missing? Just to review, psychological advantageousness refers to the differential value of a soul's choices based on their quality of life. And by choices, we refer to their mental and emotional intrapsychic infrastructure, how they set up their mentality and their mindset. And based on their mindset, that's going to give you their quality of life. And their quality of life is divisible into 8 dimensions of wellness. And you can look at any of them and match them up, like take the physical wellness and see how does that relate to my urge to eat cookies. So that's basically what the research is about. And by doing this, now beliefs become less arbitrary, right? So now I can say, all right, well, the urge to eat cookies is not as advantageous as the urge to eat celery because of its effect on my physical health. And now we have a basis to judge objectively at most and intersubjectively at least, which beliefs are better than others. And I'll use a controversial example. Let's say the belief that God exists. Let's just use that one. That's over here. So somewhere in this person's mentality, there's this basic core belief that God exists. How does that affect them socially? Well, socially, it may affect how they cope. When people go through certain things, sometimes their response is, God has a plan. Well, if you don't believe God exists, you can't really use that. Like, that's not gonna, you don't get that benefit. So if we just, and this is getting into this is like a foreshadow of where the research is headed. So basically what we would do is say, okay, gotta believe. Y'all may not be able to see this, but I'll see it so I can remember. God exists. That's the belief. And let's just say one of these bricks, one of these cornerstones of this house is that belief. All right. And so when we're trying to figure out, okay, basically the question we're asking is, what is the psychological advantageousness of this belief? How does this belief support our mental and emotional infrastructure? Is it weak? Is it fragile? Or is it strong? Is it firm? What do we get out of believing that? So if we were to take a poll of 100 people that believe that God exists, right? And then look at their, you can look at any of them. Let's go social. Or let's go to coping. If we give them an assessment that measures their comfortability with coping with life stress in general. We can even do heart rate. Like, we don't want it to be as subjective. We can go to heart rate and see, for the people that believe that God exists out of 100, what's the average heart rate, basically. And then this one belief can stand alone on its own. And it kind of brings us to platonic forms where the soul is just this entity that's wielding the belief. We wear the beliefs like clothes. Like, my belief is this t-shirt. And I'm saying, when I wear this shirt, how much play am I going to get? Or should I change my shirt if I realize I'm not getting a lot? Now, say this shirt is mass produced, then I could ask the question, out of everybody that bought this shirt, how many people get in play? Or how many numbers y'all getting? Or whatever the outcome is you want, how many followers or likes or clicks or whatever it is that you're looking for, how much you get based off wearing that shirt. saying beliefs are basically clothes that you wear. And when you wear those clothes, how does that affect the quality of your life? You know? And so I might want to relate this to heart rate. And you might say, well, what do clothes got to do with heart rate? Well, it might not be cut and dry. You know, it might be some type of mediation, moderation, or something. Prime example, let's say I wear ski masks. I wear a shiesty. Boom. Now, that may relate to heart rate because it may affect me socially. If I go in certain neighborhoods and I'm wearing that, you know, people might treat me a certain way. They might be worried about what I'm gonna do. So now I'm worried about what they're gonna do to me, thinking I'm gonna do something to them. So now my heart rate may be elevated. Or for some people, if you find yourself wearing push-ice and you're in an environment where people typically scared of you, maybe you feel a little more at ease. Especially compared to like if you're from an environment that was like stressful. Say you live in a hood, but like you went to go visit somewhere nice, you got a push-ice in your arm, you probably feel comfortable. Like most of these people scared of me, they ain't about to touch me or nothing, they ain't gonna do nothing to me. I'm cool. So then maybe your heart rate would be like lower. I mean, it can work either way, but the benefit is we can see general trends. So it's not just going to be based off one individual. I mean, for that person, yes, it would be based off one individual. It's you versus you. Like you could say, how is this belief helping me today, and do it longitudinally. So like, how is this belief helping me in 6 months or a year or whatever the case is. You might have a belief like, yeah, weed is the best thing ever. Or like over time, like that belief might change. Like sometimes people want to quit weed, but weed don't want to quit them, you know? And it's like the belief changed, but the behavior hasn't. But the behavior hasn't because the urge or the drive, going back to like how they set themselves up, you know, we condition ourselves. And that's basically what I was getting to with academics. Your teachers condition you a certain way. And the schemes that you form from being conditioned have expiration dates because your environment and the situations that you face are going to change. And so that's just one simple example how, you know, looking at how much of an advantage does a belief that God exists give us, and we can judge it based on heart rate. And if we can do that, I can say, man, it's better to be atheist. Why is it better to be atheist? Because atheists have lower heart rates. Because people that believe in God, maybe they heart rate be up high because they're upset. They feel like God ain't helped them in a certain situation, whatever the case is. It can look a million ways. Like in real life, I don't have the data. I'm just giving you the conceptual framework. Like this is basically where I'm at, what I'm studying. And the other thing I would add, you know, since this is like an update, that's the gist of it. But then there's like certain features I'll add. For example, included in your mental and emotional infrastructure, I would add disposition, like how you show up in the world. Like when you wake up in the morning, who you think you are, right? Like when you show up at work or you look in the mirror, like your identity is going to be tied to this. Like this is going to bubble up into an identity. And so also most people watching this in America are familiar with the story of Three Little Pigs. And I like that story because it basically shows the difference between mentalities, and you can assess their psychological advantageousness based off their quality of life, meaning like fear, which could tie into heart rate. It could just be like the integrity of the house. So let's just go to the story. In the story, right, we got three pigs. They all brothers. And they're like, all right, bet. We don't want to live together. We want different houses. Cool. So one builds a straw house. One builds a house out of straw. One builds a house out of sticks. And the other one builds this house out of bricks. But in my scenario, let's say it's not three separate pigs. Let's say it's one pig at three separate stages of their life, or three different mindsets that they have. And so when you're young and you see the world in a simple, this simple way, a straw house seems sufficient. Why? Because you probably don't even know that wolves exist. Like you're probably innocent. You thinking like, oh, I found some straw, let me put this together, boom, that's good enough. In life, there's a natural process growth that comes with trial and error. Like you don't really know that a straw house ain't solid until you go through a situation where you learn that it's not solid, and that's how people form their triggers. Trauma has like a lasting impact because we try to prevent, what we found out happened last time. We try to prevent it from happening again. So boom, let's say the pig is 10 years old. They got their mindset based off what their parents told them, what they could grasp from school, like elementary school up until grade 5. Like they have a world view. Another word I didn't write on here, but it's important is ontology. Now, ontology is basically the study of what exists. And this ties directly to this question of God existing. And people have different ontological systems, meaning like some people believe in heaven and hell, some people don't. But that's basically what we're questioning, like how are souls affected by the belief in the existence of heaven and hell? Or how are souls affected by the belief that angels exist? Some people believe in demons, some people believe. And, it plays out, going back to the mental health. I'm going to get back to disposition, but it plays into mental health because you take something like schizophrenia, and we have so many different ways to look at schizophrenia. Some people see it as, it's a chemical imbalance, it's dopamine deficiency, or whatever the case it is, or still unknown, but they break it down in terms of biology and chemistry. And they treat it based off chemistry and biology. But then you got this whole other side that sees it as a spiritual thing, like, these schizophrenic patients are actually acutely aware of the spiritual realm. They can see demons and they can see these entities that don't have physical flesh, So basically, within their ontological system, there's more souls, but there's also spirits. I don't know. Some people see souls and spirits as two separate things. Some people use them interchangeably. There's a lot of ways you can do it, but the point being, however you set up yourself on the inside is going to affect what you get on the outside. And ontology is a great word to just encompass all of that. Like, what do you believe exists? Because you got to think, sometimes people choose certain options because that's all they thought was available. It's kind of like you go to McDonald's, so you've never been to another restaurant before. You go to McDonald's, all you see is like Whoppers and I'm sorry, that's a lie. That's Burger King. That shows you I don't eat there. But all you see is Big Macs and McChickens and mixed stuff, like everything with Mc Oreo, whatever. That's all you know, and you gotta think as a kid, you only know what your parents put in front of you, which kind of goes back to like people believe what they can. You ain't been exposed to certain things, so there's no way you could believe this. No way you can have a thought about them. There's no way they can influence your schemas or your beliefs or your urges, or whatever. Like you're not privy to that. And so, bringing it all back, 10-year-old makes a straw house. They find out because the wolf comes and blows it down that house ain't good enough. So cool. They cry, they terrified, or whatever. Now you in the avoidance side of PTSD. And in the avoidance side, you do everything in your power to prevent that situation from happening again, which is reasonable. I mean, why would you want to go through it twice if you ain't like it the first time? So then that same pig goes and they build a stick house. Now the stick house, the stick mindset is a little bit stronger than the straw. We could say the straw mindset could be like maybe a core belief that you have is Santa Claus exists. Now, that's not saying the belief that Santa Claus exists should be removed by the time you get to this stick house. Maybe it's the position, right? Because we put core beliefs as the cornerstones of the house. Like, that's the foundation. But we might realize, like, that's a weak belief. Like, that's easily refuted, So maybe we don't get rid of the belief, but maybe we change its position. Maybe we change our attitude towards it. Maybe we change our disposition, like how we show up in the world. So I'm not showing up in the world with a knife or a gun trying to protect the fact that Santa Claus is real. And that's how kids show up. Like, kids will beat you up. You tell them Santa Claus is not real if their parents ingrained that in them. Like, if their parents took them to the mall They sitting on laps, they watching the movies, like they kind of bought into like the mainstream acculturation of like Christmas. Yeah, like Santa Claus being real is gonna be a core belief, and you have a hard time convincing them otherwise. But it's easy to tear that down. Like there's a lot of reasons we know Santa Claus is not real. I mean, he's real, but it's not who you think he is. And so say they get a stick house, they have that same belief, but instead of that being like a core belief, it's a periphery belief. Maybe they know like Santa Claus isn't who they thought he was, but they still kind of like, like I still practice. Like, because some people, I mean, obviously for the parents, they know Santa Claus is not that man at the mall. They still gonna take their kids. So it's an understanding like, yeah, this is like entertainment for a child. This is like an experience for the child to go through, but you already know like it's not much more than that. So your attitude towards it, you can rearrange the structure. It's no different from having a house. You like, matter of fact, we're gonna knock this wall down, or we're gonna add a patio, we want to add a balcony, or you could renovate your house. So that's essentially what happens in the story. So Pig builds a straw house at 10 years old. The wolf comes, somebody comes tell him, your parents putting them presents under the tree. They're like, oh my God, I ain't. Or they wake up on Christmas Eve and they see they father downstairs eating the cookies. Like now you just disillusioned. So now you realize, oh man, it's not what I thought it was. So then you rebuild your house, kind of like Jenga. Like it fall down, you build it back up. You build a house, now you got a stick house. And with the stick house, you got some firmer beliefs, so maybe that's not important to you, but maybe your belief is, let's say you do the stick house by 15. We just put in time gaps in between, just to say, the person had time to grow. By 15, maybe you feel like weed is harmless. And maybe that's a core belief. Everybody trying to get you to stop smoking weed, you ain't trying to hear it. You like, nah, weed is harmless. Weed could do no wrong. God put weed on earth for us to smoke it, and that's in the story. Well, that's gonna hold up for a while, but then that wolf is gonna come, and that wolf might be, damn, my health is messed up because I've been smoking weed every day, and now I don't know, I can't run like I used to. I got chest pain, or I'm coughing randomly for no reason, or my lips turn black on my gums, or I stopped showering, or I got wrapped up, I'm addicted now. Whatever the case is, there's a million reasons why people, choose to stop smoking, but that's the wolf. The wolf comes and blow that mentality down. That mentality shatters, and then you gotta like go through the process of rebuilding, trying to, find a new one. So then eventually you get to this brick house, and it's like, all right, but maybe I still smoke weed, but I know like weed is harmful, so maybe I smoke in moderation. Or maybe I don't smoke them while I just eat edibles or whatever the case is. Like, it can work either way. You gradually over time, you progressively renovate and re-renovate the house and add wings or basements or attics within your mentality, within your mindset to make room for yourself as you grow. And, as you go through that process, this notion of psychological advantageousness gives people a platform to actually critique the specific bricks or the specific beliefs, thoughts, memories, urges, mood patterns, schemas that make up that mentality. So since now we can dissect the mentality, we can evaluate it and figure out, all right, maybe if I make this one change to my mentality, then I could get a different quality of life outcome. And this is all supported by like motivational literature. Like if you listen to motivational speakers, a lot of what they talk about, and therapists and social workers, like in mental health and stuff like that, a lot of what they talk about is this process of refining or redefining or renovating that house or that structure, that mental and emotional, it's just like an infrastructure, your mentality. Like you keep like working on it, building it, working on it, because there's a lot of issues. There's a lot that could go wrong with it, Like it's no different from in real life. You might have a house, you got a TV, but it don't work, but y'all ain't get a new one, but it's just sitting there. And in a similar way, like sometimes we have certain tenets or like aspects of our mentality that don't really serve us, but we ain't changed them yet either. So it's not like it's an automatic, like as soon as we realize it's not working, we change it. Sometimes we go through, cognitive dissonance and things like that when we feel as though we got two competing beliefs, so maybe my belief and my experience are competing with each other. I believe that sin is real, but at the same time, it's proof right in front of me that sin is not. I see my father eating the cookies, or I see my father putting the present down, or I realize we don't have no chimney. So how does Santa get in the house? No chimney, and all of that is going to affect my quality of life, how I relate to my peers. If I'm keeping, like, say I had a straw house, something happened, it tore down, and I didn't improve it, like if I left it how it was, or maybe I never rebuilt it. So my mentality kind of like shattered after that event. Now I might be into, like psychopathology and stuff like that. Now you might see some of these dimensions of wellness not being fully satisfied, or like having issues in like certain areas of your life because maybe you don't, maybe your mentality is fractured or like damaged or something like that, and you left it like that. Because in life, it's gonna, like, you're gonna have epiphanies, you're gonna have realizations, there's gonna be times where you're disillusioned. But if you can't pick yourself back up, like get back on a horse after you fall off, you might just sit there stuck and fragmented. It might be there for however much time. And that's pretty much everything, that's new. The key bonds, while I got this controller, is basically going back to triggers, buttons, and like the wiring of the brain. So if you think about like a video game controller, say you playing Grand Theft Auto, you pull a right trigger, that means shoot. So every time you push that button, there's that reaction. And in a similar way, some people have those buttons emotionally where they feel like if you talk about my mother, then I'm going to want to fight, or I'm going to instantly be angry. So it's like people might realize their buttons and then press them on purpose, like, I bet I want to make such and such upset today, or we going to gel off such and such, or we going to, this is going to be funny. Watch this. Oh, your mother, da, da, da. And then you're angry, now you're fighting because they press that button. But the empowering part of this notion of psychological advantageousness is because now we can identify the button, which is an aspect of your mentality, of your mental and emotional intrapsychic infrastructure. We can also evaluate the outcome. So it's identifying the button, and then it's evaluating, like, how is this button helping? And that's where key bonds comes in. If you play games, especially computer, like PC games, you can go in and change like what button means what. So whereas by default, R2 might mean shoot, you can change R2 to mean jump. So every time you pull what used to be the shoot button, you jump instead. Or every time somebody talk about your mother, instead of you fighting them, maybe you just walk away. Or maybe in your mind, you beat them up mentally, like you just visualize beating them up, but you like, again, going back to life situations become more complex, you get older, you start to achieve more, you got stuff to lose. You can't just jump off the handles because somebody talked about your mother and you run a business or something like that. Or you in a position where it's not in your best interest to go to jail. So you jumping off the handles is kind of shows up as a weakness because now your position for whatever you've achieved becomes fragile. The house is a straw house. Like if you recruit a lot of success, but it's fragile. Like it's kind of like a kid that's popular for something. I don't know. Maybe they're popular because they got nice sneakers or new sneakers. But like when them sneakers get old, I have to see a popularity. It's a fragile foundation. That might just be a straw house or a stick house. And that wolf, is going to come. It's kind of like building a house on sand. So we have the structure of the house itself, but all of this is within the mind of the individual. So it's also the landscape that you put it on. Like, is your house built on bedrock? Is your house built on sand? Is your house floating on a board on top of some water? Like, is your house tied to some balloons floating in the air? There's a lot of ways that people can be creative about visualizing their own mentality. I would imagine it's billions, if not trillions, of conceptualizations and images of people's mental and emotional intrapsychic infrastructures. But regardless of what it looks like. Psychological advantageousness offers us a construct and opens the door to a body of work where we can analyze the mentalities, identify the parts of it, and then critique them and find like which are better and which are worse, or which ones are more advantageous and which ones are not, and change them. So if you realize I need to change that button, like that can't be a button no more. Maybe I need to disable that, replace it with something else. And that's what you do to move on to your next stage in life to get a better mentality. Like I said before, like you might not get rid of the belief that sin exists. You may just move it from maybe that shouldn't be a core belief. Like now you just expose that belief as weak. So I bet I'm gonna keep it, but maybe that's just like a flower pot outside the house, but it's not the foundation of the house. And last thing I would feel is worth mentioning. The utility of this. This not only works for individuals and it doesn't just work for like beliefs, because you can ask the question like, what beliefs are most psychologically advantageous within this framework? You can also ask what organizations or organizational affiliations are most psychologically advantageous. So instead of focusing on a specific belief, you might focus on identity, which could include membership. So let's say which fraternities or which gangs or which employers confer the most advantage to the members. And you can do that and find general trends. So we take all the Q's, all the capitals, all the deltas, and then give them a survey, measure of quality of life, and then you can just compare them and see like, okay, we know people that go through this organization typically get this average quality of life outcome, and people that go to this school get this average quality of life outcome, and or this average. And when I say quality of life outcome, remember it can be something as simple as heart rate. It can be how you perform on a neuropsychological assessment, such as the Stroop test or Wisconsin Car Store or a digit span test or any type of test. My work is primarily focused on the neuropsychological. So in the paper and what we're doing is going to focus on the brain and the nervous system and neuropsychological assessments. But that's just one domain within the 8 dimensions of wellness. We can also look at socially, like how's it affecting socially. And so the reason I include, if you can see it, like proteins, amino acids, elements, atoms, quarks, is really just to, I would say, like part of the reason, part of the inspiration for even doing this research is kind of like that thirst for knowledge, like just wanting to know things. I mean, it's one thing to feel like confident in what you're saying, but I just felt like there was more that I wanted to know, and this program is really like helping me do that. So this breakdown from proteins to amino acids to elements to atoms, of course, is like breaking it down to the smallest parts, and these can be tied to these components of the me is MEI, mental and emotional intrapsychic infrastructure. Like if you could break down a belief into proteins, into amino acids, into elements, into atoms, into quarks. And I say that because when you have certain beliefs, there are certain physiological associations that happen simultaneous with the formation of the belief, the recall of the belief, and I would venture to say the exercise of the belief. Now, this is all intuitive, so I don't have no data for y'all, but I'm just putting it all together. Like right now, as I'm explaining all of this, my brain is doing something. This is all happening at the same time. And I have a brain scan machine, but it can't fit on my head. And they need more. No. This is the word mentioned. They need more at-home brain scan machines for people with hair, specifically black people with locks. we need some things made for us. Cause yeah. But anyway, point being, your brain is doing something the whole time. So every time you use a schema, every time you use anything times 0 = 0, your brain fires a certain way. And if you look at brains firing in electricity, that kind of brings us here to elements, atoms, quarks. When the brain does things, it uses neurotransmitters, right? Neurotransmitters basically consist of molecules and amino acids. Amino acids combine to form proteins. So if you go the other way, proteins break down into amino acids and molecules. And so you might have, for example, you have dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter that's used. And dopamine breaks down into 8 carbon, 11 hydrogen, 1 nitrogen, and 2 oxygen. It looks like this, right? And so if you break down any of these elements that's in this, or the atoms, let's just break down hydrogen. It looks like this. You got 1 proton, 1 electron. But then if you want to go a little bit further, you can break down those protons that's in the atom into quarks. You got 2 up quarks and 1 down quark. And I would venture to say that quarks are probably divisible as well. So everything we're talking about in terms of psychological advantageousness has a biological, a physical, and a quantum biological and a quantum biophysical correlate that we're in the process of understanding the connection better. Right now, I feel confident conceptually, understanding it, but data makes a difference. And within the proton, you have this concept of nuclear force, which may explain, which may relate to, I didn't put it up here, but I had it. Vibes. When I say vibes, I mean sometimes people feel vibes between themselves and a certain environment, an object, or another person, whatever the piece is, but vibes also radiate from a certain individual. You can feel a certain way towards yourself with yourself, which goes into disposition and attitude and self-image. So that's pretty much where my research is now. This is updated version. Yeah, that's where we at. And if you have any questions, put a comment. Feel free to share this, like, comment, whatever. Yeah, that's pretty much it.